A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sally Chew from Temasek Polytechnic's Center for Transcultural Studies, bringing you the final session for 2015 in the series of live webinars jointly brought to you by the Singapore Training and Development Association, better known as STADA here in Singapore, and the Center. STADA is committed to contribute to the sharing of knowledge for the development of human capital capabilities for all its stakeholders and friends. It is through webinars like this that STADA and CTF seek to bring together thought leaders from around the world to share on current and practical issues that help organizations increase productivity and improve performance in the workplace. The topic for today's session is applying talent analytics for productivity, or what some authors have described this as the datafication of human resources. Datafication has invaded almost every aspect of our lives, from datafying our friendship network through Facebook to ways in datafying our driving. And so, what in the world is this big thing about this big data in productivity and performance in the workplace? And for this, we have is Mr. John Gunawan. He calls himself a data nerd. John lived and studied in the US and was a graduate in economics from UCLA. He currently manages HR Service Center and HR Reporting and Analytics function at True Religion Apparels, and he is currently pursuing his master's in Predictive Analytics in Northwestern University. Now, time to get yourselves comfortable and join in the world of data and be nerdy for an hour. John, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. Can everyone hear me? Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you very well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sally. Let me shoot over to my presentation, but I am very excited to talk about this topic, and as you know, it's definitely a topic that's on fire. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Perfect. So today, as Sally mentioned, it's all about the datafication in the world of HR. And as we go through this topic, I think it's pivotal that we understand that HR has not been known to play friendly in the world of data. But we do track a lot of data. So as you might know, that when we hire someone, when we collect information on that individual, the new employee, we track their address, we track their name, their national ID number. So we're familiar with data, but taking it to the next level is where we're at now, which is going to be an exciting topic, an exciting time. So a little bit about myself, as Sally had mentioned. I am a self-proclaimed data nerd. I am currently pursuing my master's in predictive analytics at Northwestern University. I am actually during finals week right now, and my last final is this Sunday. So after this final, which is in time series forecasting, I will have one more quarter until I graduate with my degree in predictive analytics, which is exciting because I can't wait to practice it in the field and not juggle work and school at the same time, because it's been very stressful, a very high pressure time. But nonetheless, I've been learning a lot. As Sally mentioned, I'm currently at True Religion brand jeans, and if you do not know the brand or are familiar with it, we are a denim company. We are all about fashion forward boldness, and if you recognize the name, you're familiar with that. Our logo is that horseshoe. So I'm currently here. I've been here for almost, I'll hit 2 years later this in March of 2016. So time has been flying. But it's been a great opportunity for me to be working here at True Religion because, as you know, as a retailer, there's a lot of power in quantifying the data and looking at the data, especially when we're looking at the sales workforce. Similarly, as Sally mentioned, I graduated from the University of California, Los Angeles, where I majored in economics. The funny thing about that was, even though I majored in economics, I was actually going in for accounting. And then ended up finding HR in one of my internships and then just fell in love with it. So I had to say goodbye to accounting, and I went to HR, and now I'm still here, and I love it day to day, day in and day out. And just for reference, in the past, I held jobs at Red Bull North America, as well as in their global headquarters in Austria, which is a beautiful, beautiful country, by the way. If you get to visit Austria, especially Salzburg, Austria, amazing, amazing city. Other than that, Orion Health Inc., which is it's a health IT firm based in North America as well as in New Zealand, and before that, Jackson National Life Insurance. So a lot of these experiences definitely in HR, and one thing in common was the data. I started out in an HRIS role, and if you're familiar with the HRIS role, it's HR information systems. So data in, data out, reporting was my day-to-day life. So that's how I got started. And that's where now I'm at in regards to predictive analytics, because the data is the source, it's the foundation. So one thing about predictive analytics that should be mentioned is it's trending, it's on fire. Probably why we have this webinar right now, because everyone wants to know more about it. And as you can tell from the news articles, talent analytics, a crystal ball for your workforce, from Forbes Leadership, top 10 tips to get started with people analytics by one of the pioneers in data analysis and people analytics, David Green in the UK. Evolving from tracking to analytics from Inostics, another great leading firm that's looking at data analysis for HR and for talent, and looks at how we can move the needle. Another one, of course, the one and only by Josh Bersin, who is immensely popular and famous for his work, The Geeks Arrive in HR. And if you haven't read this article, or if you heard about it, you know what I'm talking about in regards to how people analytics has garnered our attention, especially in industries where we need to do more in HR. Previously in business articles, in Forbes, in the HBR, Harvard Business Review, there's been a lot of articles actually saying that HR shouldn't be a function anymore. But trending-wise, we're looking at a great point in time where analytics has allowed us to see a business value addition for HR. But if you haven't seen this article, I recommend it, highly recommend it. Read it, save it, print it out, keep it at your desk, because Josh talks about people analytics, and he's saying that it's here, and we are on a exponential drive right here and a climb. One thing about Josh Bersin was a few weeks ago, I actually was able to attend a conference in San Francisco, California, headed by one of the firm's HiQ Labs, and then that's just H-I and then the letter Q Labs, based in San Francisco, and they're a startup company that's looking at data externally and internally, tracking predictive models for attrition. So that's your turnover, right? What's pushing employees out of the company. And the awesome thing is they're looking at data outside of the company. What is pulling the employee? And a simple analysis or analogy to that is when someone updates their LinkedIn, it's like a percentage more likely for an employee to be grabbed by someone else just because they updated their LinkedIn page, right? And I think everyone's familiar with that point of view, but they actually quantify that and give companies who are willing to invest in predictive analytics a predictive model to identify key players who would be potentially leaving and how to retain them. Back to my point in regards to this exponential growth, I actually stole this graph from Josh Bersin's presentation because I think it's relevant and it explains our situation right now. We are probably around that 16 mark, number of years in the future, because in data analytics for talent and people operations, right? We are about to spike up, and it's probably evident based off of the number of companies that you've been seeing offering analytics, a number of great corporations trying to start their analytics, and sooner or later, within the coming years, or maybe sooner, we're definitely going to hit that exponential growth mark, and it's going to be an exciting time. And I hope that you guys are excited about this as much as everyone else in the field. So predictive power, what is predictive analytics? Before I start in regards to this, it's a hot word, predictive analytics, and of course you may think that it's self-explanatory because what you're doing is you're predicting from the data. But the key thing about here is there's a lot of confusion in regards to what predictive analytics is and what it's not. So one thing that I want to make a point on is predictive analytics is not just your basic static reports or your basic dashboards. It takes your data, but then it's more of the modeling process that takes the additional data, scrubs the data, looks for correlations, and then suggests that X, Y, and Z predicts this outcome. So for example, a basic turnover report in regards to you have 15% attrition or a turnover rate, it's not technically predictive analytics. So it's a common confusion in regards to it, but it's difficult when you're trying to form a team because sometimes a lot of companies are looking for predictive analytics, but they're offering jobs that are suitable for reporting and data only. And this is actually an interesting topic because you can actually see these job descriptions out there, and a lot of the companies are doing this. So if there's nothing relevant in regards to prediction, nothing relevant to using statistical analyses, regression analysis, data science, or generalized linear models, it's missing that predictive power to add value in a predictive analytics way. And that's just a caution in regards to the current field right now. It's just similar situation when big data came up and is coming up right now still, and how people are talking about big data. But as we mentioned, this is incredibly applicable to talent and people, and I'll go through the examples of this as well as who's pioneering predictive analytics at the moment. So leading companies, Capital One is a great example. As you guys know, they are a banking company, and Capital One challenged the interview and hiring methods that HR relied on. The whole company as itself focuses on analytics and data, and HR could not and shouldn't have been left out. At its foundation, the HR team developed the methodology for focused on measuring a person's abilities and skills. And how did they do that? They did this with mathematical case interviewing, behavioral and attitudinal tests, and multiple rounds of interviewing. Quantifying all that data and gathering all that data, and then attaching it and finding correlations in regards to their top performers allowed them to be successful in the hiring phase, especially in the recruitment phase. So they created that predictive model in regards to how well they tested on their interviews, as well as what would make them do well at the company and perform well. So they focus on analytics, and that's a great example in regards to a company that did not just focus on just the company separate to HR, but included HR. And that's going to be a point that I'm going to touch on later as well. A second example is Google. Of course, Google, the giant in the room, the tech company. Google's a great example as well because one of their examples is Project Oxygen. And most of you should, in the talent development world and the training world, would know and recognize Project Oxygen. That's when Google quantified their data on the performance side and measured managers, and they came up with, I believe, 8 key characteristics that showed predictive insight on their next great managers and leaders. The great thing about this is the data that they had about their managers, that's already captured during performance reviews, whether your performance review is annually, biannually, or even quarterly. We're already asking employees to rate their managers or rate themselves in regards to this during performance reviews, and the data is there. Taking it to the next level is that predictive step that we would want to reach towards. Another example from Google is PyLab. PyLab is actually a group of data scientists and PhDs in Google who run surveys. They develop their surveys and methodology and look at topics like what would bring engagement in at Google. And that's something that actually it's touched upon in regards to the head of Google's newest book, Work Rules, another recommended read as well. So for example, with PyLab, they discovered in regards to high employee engagement, one of the things was allowing employees to work on pet projects. and allowing 20% of their time dedicated to projects that they're excited for. And that's a great example in regards to identifying something that has high correlation to key individuals, especially employees with high engagement. Another example is CocaCola, another giant in the industry as well. This one is actually an interesting study because CocaCola was going through an interesting strategic business time where they were discovering that their main consumer was women. And I would say it's pretty accurate because in 70% of the global household purchases were made by women. 20 trillion was spent solely by women. The interesting thing that Coke found was that only 3% of Fortune 500 companies were led by women. With their data analysis here, they were able to create programs to attract, retain, and develop women leaders. So specific to diversity, and that's where the analytics came. With analytics, they were able to track gender ratios and higher positions in the company and targeted gaps where improvements were needed. Another example is Black Hills Corp. Not a lot of people may know about Black Hills, but they are a company that is 130 years old. They're much older than usual, but they actually were dealing with a crisis in regards to employees needing to retire. So with the predictive analytics capability there, they looked at the retirement years coming in, and they found out that the skills and the competencies that they needed to prepare for that. So they were jumping the gun and were able to go prepare for the future and to develop a recruitment strategy, a workforce planning strategy. They actually came up with 89 action plans to design and address potential talent shortages. IBM, another giant in their industry, is another great example because IBM actually had a business issue managing their workforce for labor-based businesses. They weren't doing it efficiently. Their processes weren't efficient. So they actually created a task force, and they named the task force the IBM's Workforce Management Initiative. And they address labor-based business issues of managing resources effectively and seamlessly across the business units and geographic borders. Their main focal point of this workforce initiative was to challenge how to manage their employees globally. And as global companies attending this webinar, that's one of the things that becomes an issue if your clients are global. They collected and captured talent, resource, and project data in one location only. And this allowed them to analyze utilization rates, which is the ratio of billable hours against available hours, which allowed them to gain insight to learning opportunities and to better manage how they assign resources to projects when IBM was servicing those projects. This actually resulted in 9% from 2003 to 2008 of an increase, and then improved their fill rate to over 90%. So another great example in regards to how analytics was pioneered by Capital One, Google, CocaCola, Black Hills Corporation, and IBM. So your big companies in the tech side, your beverage companies, as well as a 130-year-old company that maybe had around 2,000 employees, and then all of them gathered all together and pioneered how data can help the human resources, talent, and people need. So the last thing I want to talk about is what to do next. And I took bits and bits apart from what I've been reading in the field. But number one was research. There's a lot of books and blogs and LinkedIn groups that provide a lot of information. I put HR Predictive Analytics there because that's actually a group that I started. So please join because I'm constantly trying to post great examples in regards to how companies are spearheading initiatives in HR Predictive Analytics, people analytics. But books and blogs, one great example is Competing on Analytics by Davenport and Harris. Again, Davenport also writes Keeping Up with the Quants. Another great book by Lawson and Thorlin is Business Analytics for Managers. And one key trend in regards to these books that I found was not to limit yourself on just HR, human resources, or people books. Getting a handle on just the quantitative side and the data science side and the analytics side in the business is essential in regards to how successful your predictive analytics function and initiative in human resources and HR will be. Just because when you're in that realm, you can't just limit yourself with just HR data or people data. Another example in regards to just the research is blogs. iGnostic's HR Analytics Insights blog and OrgView's HR Analytics Insights blog provide great information in regards to what people are doing, as well as the companies that they've been helping to achieve their HR analytics goals. But right from the textbook, it's research. Reading your blog, signing up for subscriptions, and just getting yourself comfortable with this world. What next? Number 2 is essential in regards to the business. If you are trying to spearhead an analytics initiative for your people team, business buy-in and support is essential. I took this graph from one of Davenport's book. It's the 4 pillars of analytical competition. And he writes about this in just business analytics in general. But of all the 4 pillars, senior executive commitment is perhaps the most important because it can make the others possible. So when you're in your role, in your department, and you don't have that support, you know that it's going to drop your engagement, first of all, but your project won't be seen as a priority. My recommendation in this is to gear up and find that executive leadership who supports the data side. And that's easy because there's going to be a lot of them from the finance world, the business planning world, the strategic planning world, even the sales world, even the marketing world, because one thing about marketing is they spearheaded analytics in marketing analytics and web analytics years ago. But to get ahead of the game and look for that executive leadership is essential. Because at the end of the day, their voice and their support will allow you to invest in further research opportunities in predictive analytics, even in system investments as well. Number 3 is data. And this is an interesting topic because everyone has data, and you're collecting it anyway, whether it's going to be in an Excel spreadsheet, in a robust HRIS, or in all these other systems. For example, with True Religion Apparel right now, we have one HRIS that handles our HR information as our human capital management system. They handle our payroll information. They handle also our workforce management information. But we also have systems for our performance management framework, engagement, and our organizational charts. So we have multiple systems out there. But we're collecting it. One great idea here is to invest probably in a data warehouse or in a way where you can streamline all the data, because one of the things about analytics and data is trying to capture all the data and have it in one location. And that could be a huge barrier in your analytics success. Usually 80% to 90% of the time is cleaning up your data. But that's already expecting that you'll be able to obtain the data and merge them all together. So that would be critical in regards to how your data is set up. One thing is to partner with IT or someone who is in the HRIS side as an HRIS consultant to look at where your data is stored and how you can better manage that and merge everything all together. Data is descriptive, as you know, exploratory, predictive, and prescriptive. Briefly on these topics, your descriptive data, that's self-explanatory in regards to it just describes something like 14% turnover. Exploratory data, that's where you actually take the initiative and look at the data and explore it, whether it's going through one of the tools and softwares that I list at the bottom and look at trends, insights, and the likes. Taking the step further is your predictive and prescriptive. And as you know, as I mentioned in the beginning, predictive is your predictive insights. It's predicting the future, predicting what will happen. Prescriptive, on the other hand, is how to fix it, how to resolve it, a solution in regards to your data. And that's visible usually when the analyst goes through their steps in describing the data, exploring the data for insights and trends, creating a predictive model, and being tied to the business and having key stakeholders in the business. They're able to find a prescriptive method in regards to their data and whatever business issue they're facing. And of course, we have business data and HR data. One of the key things that I've been hearing a lot and what I've been focusing on here is that they cannot live separately, especially when you're trying to spearhead a predictive analytics function in your people world. One thing I want to reiterate is that doing predictive analytics in HR is fantastic. It's a great way to learn how data is powerful in a predictive manner when you build that model. But tying it to business data, such as your sales and your revenues, that would be a game changer. That would be something that would add tremendous value to the business, and not just your HR team, but the executives, the business, and how to drive and compete with analytics. Lastly, I do want to mention is your tools and your software. And this is something that I'm passionate about because this has actually been one of the greatest focus during my curriculum in my master's program. And so this master's program is actually going to hit 2 years soon, but we've gone over Python, SAS, and R, and SPSS. And if you're familiar with them, they're programming languages and softwares. R is highly recommended. I use R a lot in regards to exploratory data analysis, as well as running my predictive models through different regression types. Plus, it's open source and free to download for anyone. There's packets everywhere in their library that you can download, as well to enable your data journey. The additional thing about R is there's a lot of free and complementary sources out there for you to learn how the programming language works. R is very robust, and the thing is, don't be afraid in regards to diving into R. It's going to be scary initially because you're going to be coding like a programmer, but once you get the steps, and once you get comfortable with the system, it becomes very easy to maneuver. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of resources out there for R. SAS, as you know, is actually a private company, and their system usually is paid for, especially in a lot of industries with analytics as their focus. But it has same functionalities as R, and lastly, Python and SPSS, same statistical tools, same programming language. The thing about this is each system has their own programming language, which becomes a little different when you switch between the systems. But as a recommendation to start, I would recommend that you go with R. It's open source, free, and there's a lot of tutorials out there to help you out while you put your toes in the water to learning the tool. Number 4 is your team and your vendors. And I added vendors because sometimes we don't have the necessary team in-house to help us out with the analytics demand, because it can take a different mindset in regards to how to maneuver around the data. Your team is essential because they're the people that you rely on. One thing I do want to say is reporting, infrastructure, analytics, and statistics. This graph that that's on this is actually, I took it from a recent article from Lorenzo Canlas, the head of talent analytics at LinkedIn, and he was describing how he created his team. And this is based on preference, based on your organization, how big your organization is, and how you want to push toward a predictive analytics function. So for Lorenzo and LinkedIn, they chose to allow their staff in talent analytics to be round, have a round scope in regards to their tasks. So not only do they do this analytics, they also focus on the infrastructure and the reporting. So everyone pitches in to do one of the topics, and they all rotate. Another structure that could be accomplished is analytics as it's separated from reporting. And I've been hearing that a lot because sometimes you want your reporting to be separated from your analytics because most of the reporting will be static and just descriptive. And analytics takes a different mindset in regards to generating a report from your system, your data warehouse. But it depends on your company, the talent that you do have, and if you're looking for talent out there, it's important to search for the typical skills that an analyst would do, and their expertise versus someone who would be willing to to focus on the infrastructure and the data warehouse and the reporting. So there's a lot of skills out there. It's usually rare for everyone to hold the skills for all 3 of them, but it's something that can be achievable if you're looking for the right person. But like I said, if internally you don't have the resources, a vendor might be best suitable in regards to your analytics efforts, especially in predictive analytics for human resources. Examples of vendors can be iNostics, HiQ Labs, OrgView. There's a bunch out there starting, and there's a lot of startups trying to develop as well. So that would be a great opportunity to jump on board the predictive analytics front and find vendors who can enable you in this function. Lastly, it's the networking and the conferences that make a difference. These are just a couple of analytics conferences that are coming up. Predictive Analytics World Workforce, headed by amazing company, Talent Analytics, that's stepping up their game in regards to talent analytics. But these are great examples to join others who are passionate about data analysis and want to make a difference in the people analytics world. But if you Google people analytics or predictive analytics conferences, you'll get a ton. But these are some that I recommend personally. And that is the end of my presentation.
John, thank you
Yes.
very much. I think
No problem.
I think that this has been very helpful for the non-nerds, and of course, all the best for your finals. We are, of course, predicting unqualified success for you.
Thank you.
I have one question sent in by a viewer. The question is, John, we have heard a lot about big data and performance reviews, but how does your data relate with the new trend in big companies to even remove performance reviews? Over to you, John.
That's a great question. That is something that we would want to address with your culture. I actually was trying to discuss this with the team here because we are going through engagement phase. And one of the things is where you don't want to sacrifice the culture of the company and slow down with the performance side because the annual review process, the verbiage out there and the trend out there is to get rid of it because it's not adding value. But the thing is, if you don't capture the data and when you don't analyze it, you don't add value. But if you capture the data and you do analyze it and provide a statistical model that can be a predictive model out there, that would be analyzing data. So it's a catch-22. So you would have, it's something that you would have to address with the team, the culture of the company, the CEO, and say, hey, although the word out there is to not capture the data, I want to prove that we can. So maybe it's going to be a trial run with one department. One department captures data, whether it's an annual basis, biannual, frequent would be better. The other parts of the organization get rid of performance evaluations, but at this point, when a company is at the point to get rid of performance evaluations, the company already knows that HR didn't do their job when we were doing performance evaluations before because we weren't doing anything with the data. But now, once you get the opportunity and you're trying to buy back that trust, that will be the point where you would want to prove that you can analyze the data and still be able to do performance evaluations. And Google was one example with their initiative with trying to figure out that manager and the 8 criteria that makes a manager. And they still do performance evaluations. So it's going to be a cultural conversation that you have with the executives and the company.
Thank you, John. I think the road to change is not easy. I think Laurie from Learning Strategies CG, you have a question to ask, I understand. Laurie, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Sally. John, so just building on what you're saying, so my background is psychology and behavior change, and how do we create cultures of learning? So I work with like DBS, HP, all kinds of organizations. And like you say, on the one hand, we're breaking the annual review, but what about still using data analytics? But I'm just pushing it a little bit to the back end, meaning in the front end, how do we get people learning and adapting more consciously and perhaps capturing data and their self-reflection on how they're improving their performance, and really, like people like myself and your expertise, partnering more So, because I think if I'm going to speak for the others, but it is quite scary when you're talking about all these, predictive analytics, and like I'm coming from the sort of art, sort of psychology side, you coming from the hardcore maths. But I do believe if we marry and work together, like with the business analysts and people like yourself, without trying to become the experts like you guys are, but how do we partner and create a culture of learning and adapting every day where people are more conscious of their own data? And I'm going to stop there, because as you know, I mean, it's a big subject, but would you agree on that partnership? And also it's less overwhelming then, because I'm not going to try and become and get the skill set that you've got, which you clearly got, masters and whatever. Okay, I'll stop there. So what do you think?
I agree with you 100%. The caveat here that I want to explain is HR predictive analytics is not absolute. You will always need to get the advice from the business, whether it's from the learning side or other key functions to get business value. At the end of the day, when you're trying to add value for a business and you're doing analytics, you are in one zone and you have blinders up because you're going to be, you won't know the key things that are happening in the business. And so things like learning and marrying the two together is important. I do not advise solely on trusting the predictive model 100%. There's always a qualitative piece that we would need to take into consideration 100%. It's always going to be a partnership between another side for learning and allowing individuals to explore the data.
Well, John, questions are coming fast and furious for you. There's another question. When you only deal with data and analysis, where is the human touch and interaction? What about interviews? How do you then choose a good candidate?
That's one of the points that is another great point, because this is actually something that gets a little tension, especially in your HR department when you have recruitment in the room as well. A lot of stories has been, I created this great model, I analyzed all the performance values of our top performers in the company, and I told recruitment that if they run through this model and they fit this model with at least a 70% or higher at the end of the day, a rating, you have someone that you need to hire. I do not agree with that, because at the end of the day, you're crossing into a function that's yours and yours old, and they know what they are doing. What we want to do is go into recruitment and talent acquisition and say, hey, I have something that will supplement you in your hiring needs. This might be a step in regards to this individual passes the predictive model, but at the end of the day, you still need a human touch. No doubt about it, 100% agree. You still need to have a conversation or interview with an individual before hiring them. So just because the computer and the model says that they are 100% predicted to be 100% successful in the company and as a high performer does not mean that you need to hire the person. Once you get them into the interview, I think it'll be self-explanatory based off of my recruitment friends to hire someone or not.
Thank you. Some more questions I'm reading on the Facebook. John, can you give some concrete examples of the results of the analysis? And that's quite similar to a question I was going to ask you. How do you make that predictive analysis more evident? And can you give examples of how predictive analysis has been used in some companies?
So other than the examples in the presentation, one thing that I'm currently working on is trying to tie our training for sales associates out in the field to revenue. So does our training actually predict and tell us that our sales employees are making higher sales and we're having more sales per hours and we're having more conversions at the store, or does it not? So one thing about our training is I've divided it up in groups in regards to categories. Each training actually has a test, and we require employees to get an 80% or higher. So running through the exploratory data analysis, I was able to find, for example, and this should be a good concrete example, that, for example, and this is not because of confidentiality, this is not going to be 100% accurate, but it's going to mimic the situation. But test A, for example, did not have high correlation to sales revenues. Why was that? That's something that we take back to the team. Test B did have high correlation. And when you go back into the predictive side of this and your exploratory data analysis, I have to jump back to statistics right here. P-value less than 0.05, reject it, or reject the null hypothesis and whatnot. And we look at the variables that do contribute the most. So when you do your exploratory data analysis, you can identify the variables that you pick into that model when you run your regression analysis. And you say variable A, this test that we've been telling employees to get an 80% or higher is not predictive at all, and it has no correlation. The p-value doesn't agree with it at all. Statistically, we can say that this test does not add any value to generating more revenue for that store. But this test, test B, does, and it has a high p-value, and we can scientifically and statistically say that that specific test adds value in increasing the generated revenue based off of the predictive model. But that's going to be something where one key practice, making it evident, would be making sure that the data is visible to the business. Because at the end of the day, you might be giving your business negative results, and as I mentioned before, you're stepping on people's toes. And this example, for example, is another time where you might be telling the talent leaders and the learning and development leaders, and telling them that, hey, telling people to take this test A and achieve 80% isn't doing anything. You're just making them waste time. How do we reevaluate this so that we can make sure that we can add more value to the stores? And it's a partnership with those leaders, and it's always going to be a work in progress because you're going to always be looking at data continuously, refreshing your model, and it might be just the fact where you focus on the ones that do have high correlation, and tell those business leaders, back to Statistics 101, that because of the p-values, these are statistically significant in what we're trying to examine here in tests, correlating it to generating revenue. Hopefully that answers the question. I think it was long-winded.
Thank you so much, John. I can see Stella and Robin, both human resource managers from Nippon Paint and from Soup Spoon. Would you have questions so that we can all join in the learning together, Stella and Robin?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Robin. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, I was just quite intrigued John's journey in True Religion in setting up the, this data to start, basically kickstart this data analytics journey with True Religion.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, all right. I just want to know what was your experience like in your journey with True Religion to start up this data analytics, basically.
So my personal journey, because
yes.
True Religion, I have great friends in True Religion who are data nerds, so I had that support. But one example where I didn't was during the time where we were talking about engagement, which was what I was referencing when we talked about performance reviews. Because engagement is such a touchy topic, a lot of the times the team didn't want to collect data. And of course, when you're hearing this and you're a data analyst at heart, you're cringing because if you don't capture the data, what are you going to do and how are you going to prove it? How are you going to prove that our engagement program works? But that's been my journey. It's been ups and downs in regards to trying to push this forward at the team level. The good thing about this is people have been receptive to the data side, and I have key players and key stakeholders who appreciate data. It's more on working towards those who don't see the value of data at the end of the day. And that's always going to be a work in progress with any company because at the heart of it, usually in HR, data is pretty new in this manner. data isn't new in regards to storing it in your HRIS and leaving it at that. It's new in regard to taking it out, reporting out of it, and looking at it for insights. But personally, it's been an up and down journey. I've had battles in regards to trying to get data to be captured and trying to prove a point in regards to how data is managed. The other thing is I've had difficulties in regards to translating how data is important, because that's another issue, because sometimes your people analytics team may be too in the weeds and may use too complicated words. But that's going to be something that's part of the data analysis journey and the data analytics team's journey. Because at the end of the day, your audience may not know what you mean, for example, that p-value when I was referencing it before. But explaining it makes a difference. I found out that from the start, if I try to go down a rabbit's hole in explaining something statistically, it creates a lot of frustration, and at the end of the day, it actually takes away from the buy-in from either that manager or that executive support. So mastering that piece would be essential in regards to spearheading an analytics function and a journey in a company. Because sometimes when you're trying to translate something, you know it well because you've been in it for so long, but then translating it in more layman's term and in a more user-friendly term is the challenge that I think every data scientist and a data analyst is working on and has to work on. Because at the end of the day, if you want that person to understand you and to support you, you need to be able for them to understand you and to be on the same page as you as well. Hopefully that answered the question as well.
Robin? Okay?
Yes, it's good. Yeah, thank you.
Morning. Well, actually, I can appreciate with John that the journey is actually ups and downs. I think on a personal level, we have tried to bring this message to some of our clients, and I think one of the biggest challenge is tone from the top. If the boss does not believe in it, you know, it's going to be a very tedious journey. So what have you done in the past to actually help the key person, the key driver see and appreciate this, so that with his blessing, the rest of the work is actually the half the battle is won?
That's a great point. Without your managerial support and executive support, most likely your predictive analytics work won't be recognized, and that's the shame in regards to the process. My recommendation personally is to go rogue. And I don't mean this to be sarcastic or to not respect the hierarchy, but sometimes at this point you need to find and create your own committee that supports the data. And that's where I find it, where looking at the different departments that appreciate data to get them on board. Usually the finance team, that financial leader, because at the end of the day, your boss's peer might be more swayed, would be able to sway your boss in regards to catching on board. But that's not to mean that you would want to give up in regards to trying to sway your boss to support you as well. The key thing about this is if they don't get it, they're not going to be able to support you as much, and especially if they're scared about it, they're not going to be able to or be willing to support the analytics effort. So getting them to appreciate the art of data science, and then also getting that support from other leaders who are very knee-deep in the data and appreciate the data is my recommendation.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, we have come across situations where even the HR is so fearful of that, and in fact, they create roadblocks.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
I think we will have to leave roadblocks to another session, John. I think we have time for one question. I see a student from the Global Club, STADA chapter, all fired up for a question. Student, you want to ask a question now?
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I am Nat from TPISG, Temasek International Students Group. So your sharing is very informative. Thank you very much. However, I would like to know whether how to use the analytics to look for the potential participants of the events that we created. And also, how do we use data analytics to find out what kind of activities appeals to the different students from different nationalities?
That's a great question. That's totally knee deep in data. That's a great way for you to find out data in regards to like social media data, because LinkedIn data, for example, or Facebook data, getting it, setting up an API where a company like LinkedIn or Twitter can provide you with that data and going into the data and actually segmenting the data, because you can do that straight from the source. My recommendation is looking into social media data, for example, separating the data and actually looking at also the individuals who attend such webinars like this. The thing about analytics is it is universal. Whether it's in people analytics in your talent side or it's in your business side, there's analytics everywhere and data is everywhere. So the methods, the theories, the models that you want to explore, especially in the predictive side, is going to be transferable across all trades. And trying to find what appeals most to an audience. Looking at social media data, looking at the data from the individual. The only caveat here is when you're looking into all this data, there are privacy issues that you do want to address with a legal team. Just because it's going to be, especially if it's going to be a company, you don't want to step on any privacy law infringement. I hope that answers the question. I don't think I went around.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The session. Well, time is catching up. We want to thank you, John, so much. Viewers, this video will be uploaded on STADA's YouTube account. Search for STADA, you'll find this video. LinkedIn users, look for community spirit, and you also locate this. For all our viewers out there, thank you so much for participating in this final live webinar for 2015. I'm sure John helped in a big way in demystifying the big data in HR, and we wish you success in your own personal journey to datafication, in your own lives, in human capital development. As we prepare our organizations and our lives for this big data invasion, let's also prepare ourselves to celebrate the invitation to love all mankind. On behalf of STADA and the Center for Transcultural Studies, here is wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a great year ahead. We will reconnect with you in January 2016. And this is Sally Chew and the team signing off from the Global Connect Village at Temasek Polytechnic, Singapore. Have a great year ahead all. Bye.